been a few years since I've been working for Four Corners in the ABC. But anyway, it was a very long time, that's true. Yeah, some people are still young enough to remember. That's good. Look, it's fantastic to be here. It's great that such a fantastic sold-out audience. Absolutely testament to you, Tim. Fantastic. Just a little story about Tim and I and our publishing history. I remember it must have been sometime in 2016 or something, and we must have been somewhere like Brisbane. It was some weird place we were, and I was really chuffed because I just got this 2-book deal with Hachette, and I thought, oh wow, it was a bit daunting actually. I thought, I'd written one, but I didn't quite know about the second one. And I ran into Tim, and he said, "Oh yeah, I just got this 3-book deal with Simon & Schuster." I thought, holy crap, 3 books!
Well, I can tell the other side of that story, which was that there was a publisher that was reading my book and told me much later, and of course I've got an amazing home with Simon & Schuster, and they're here tonight. But about a year after, or 2 years after, so when my second book was out, I bumped into your publisher, and she said, "Look, I was really sorry about not coming back to you on that book. We had Brisso. We can't have you and Brisso." And I went, "Fair enough, he's a good writer."
Okay. So, obviously both of us were working at the ABC at the time, and one of the questions we always get asked, I'm sure you get asked all the time, is why is it the journalists are writing fiction? And my answer to that is always, this has been going on since Charles Dickens. This is something that we do. We're good storytellers. Writing fiction uses a different sort of muscle, but in journalism we're sort of asked to, in a way, to repress our emotions and not to give too much of ourselves away. And in fiction, we have to mine it. To make it work, you've got to throw that journalism away and really approach it in a different way. So I just wonder if I could get you to comment on that, Tim, firstly, because it is something we get asked all the time, and it actually really annoys me. But it is something that you sort of have to be able to talk about.
Well, the simple answer for me is that it's much more fun, exercising the creative side of your brain. But the other answer, and probably the more serious one, is that I find with fiction that you can get really close to the truth. And it's a funny thing to say because it sounds like an oxymoron, but with journalism, you are bound by certain rules. You've got to have, your facts. You've got to have your sources going on the record. You have to tick all of those boxes before you can hit publish, and before your editor is going to allow you to hit publish. With fiction, and I think particularly crime fiction, you can explore the world in a way that you can't in a way with non-fiction, because you get to create the characters, you get to set the scene, so you get to explore something in a way that the reader actually gets to feel it, because they get to fall in love with your characters, they get to hate your characters. If you're writing in that thriller sort of pacey style, you get to drag them along from the journey. And in all of my books, I always tackle a big subject. So for me, I get to explore something as if I'm a journalist, and I research them like a journalist. So in the first book, it's Australia caught in the middle of the US-China power struggle. In the second book, it's Islamist inspired terrorism and social media and the kind of wrecking ball that it's run through the media and made our jobs very difficult. Third book was around white supremacists and the rise of far-right nationalism and AFP raids, and some of us know a little bit more about that than others with what happened down at the ABC. And then this book, obviously, it's about spies. So for me, I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, in fact, it's incredibly liberating, isn't it?
Yeah.
I find it, because when you're writing journalism, you've got to stick to someone else's facts. This way, if the character wants to take you over there, good stuff. Let's go. Doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And I don't want to say it's fun. It is. And I think it's your job as a writer to entertain your readers. But I do think that crime fiction and thrillers they have that uniqueness when you get to shine a light in dark places. And I think it was Philip Roth that said something. It's always stuck with me that he was talking about a different writer, and he said as a writer he shines a light on a big issue, and he says, I dig a hole and I shine the light in the hole. And I thought that was fascinating. He's of course talking about his own writing, but for me, in a way, that applied to fiction, because you get to crime fiction, you get to peel back that extra layer and go, let's have a look in here. It's not going to be pleasant, but there is a side of life that we don't like really knowing is there, but we're actually infatuated with.
All right, well, let's talk about the hole that is Killer Traitor Spy. And you were helped quite a lot early on by Mike Burgess, who did some solid PR work for you. Back in February, when he revealed there was a highly active hive of Russian spies posing as diplomats that operated in Australia for more than 18 months using deep cover identities. The aim, he said, of the spy ring was to recruit Australians with access to classified information and steal data. And some of those spies were put in place years ago. What did you think when you saw that, having spent all that time writing this book?
Well, so 3 years, wind back the clock 3 years, and Mike Burgess, so Brissenden are the kind of geeks that read the national security assessments speeches and things, and 3 years earlier he'd given a speech where he said that there are more foreign spies or their proxies operating in Australia than at any time since the height of the Cold War. And that's when I thought I was going to write this book. So I remember seeing that and I went, I might have a little look at what the Russians are up to. So that's what I did. And then 3 years later, that speech, the other thing he said in that speech, and I actually ended up putting the quote in the front of the book, when I spotted it this year, we hadn't gone to print yet. And he said that I want to dispel any idea that espionage is some romantic Cold War notion. It is not. It is a clear and present danger. And I thought, I saw that film and that was really good. So that'll get people in. But yeah, he's done a lot of PR work for me. But that in a way, like our jobs as journalists is to report the truth. Our jobs as writers and crime and thriller writers is to try to tap the zeitgeist a bit. So you're looking out for the next thing coming over the horizon, or you're grabbing hold of something that has sort of captivated people's attention for a bit, but then maybe they never got the deeper look. And with the novel, you can dive in there.
So this novel revisits. It's the fourth in the series, essentially, the John Bailey series, as was mentioned, who's a crusty old hack with a complicated backstory, which is always, always worth reading. Ronnie Johnson, a CIA veteran. There's a Russian poisoning, a la Salisbury with Novichok. There's Russians that start turning up dead all over Sydney. A Russian agent inside the Canberra intelligence establishment. Allegedly. Give us the pitch. What is?
You just done it. You just done it. No, so look, a woman is poisoned in a hotel in Sydney. She was there meeting. She was a sex worker. She was there with a wealthy Russian businessman. He's disappeared. Bailey knows this woman. He has interesting friends, and so he wants to know what happened to her. So he's out on the trail trying to track down and find out who this Russian businessman really is. And while he's doing that, CIA officer Ronnie Johnson turns up and he's looking for him for a very different reason. It's because this guy's holding secrets and he's trying to barter them for his freedom, because he's a money launderer and someone who's been on the radar of US intelligence for a long time.
Mm. And the whole Russian intelligence thing is very interesting in the Australian context. I mean, ASIO was established in 1949 essentially as a Cold War anti-Soviet institution, trying to sort of weed out Soviet infiltration in Australia. And the Cold War generated an enormous amount of spy novel activity. John le Carré, of course, being the great protagonist of that. It's really interesting, isn't it, that we're now back, all this time later, doing it, but with a sort of a Chinese twist as well.
Yeah. I mean, we've come full circle, but the same things that were done to steal secrets back then are still the same things today. So I remember I was talking to an AFP officer around like stealing documents, and I said to him, look, I'm just trying to come up with a really clever way of like, what is the best way for me to get this document out of the building? Do I need some sort of device or this and that? He said, just walk it out, mate. So when he said that, it just made me realise that actually it is quite simple. All you need is a motivation. All you need is a secret, and someone who's going to steal it. But on the Cold War twist, the fascinating thing at the moment is, don't forget, around the time of the Beijing Winter Olympics, is that 18 months ago or 20, year and a half, 2.5 years? Russia and China. So Putin went to Beijing and met with Xi, and they had this this meeting where they signed an agreement that no one's ever seen. It's called the No Limits Partnership, and no one knows what that means. We don't. There's no when we sign a pact with the US, like it's detailed. It sort of says this is what we'll do. I mean, of course, there's secrets, but now we see with what's going on in Ukraine, and China's not sending them arms directly or anything like that, but they're pretty happy to be buying energy and stuff. So I think that's really interesting that we've got old Cold War motivations, in this new world order.
Apart from anything else, quite a lot happens in this book. And I don't want, no spoilers or anything, but I'm just going to read it.
You've highlighted a big chunk there. So
this is from page 136. Just let's pause and reflect a little here, Ronnie growled. Just as we're about to get the drop from Lebedev about a major intelligence breach in Canberra, there's an attempt on his life which results in the poisoning of a sex worker. Lebedev's closest friend dies suddenly of a heart attack. Leonard Oblinsky gets murdered in Hyde Park, for hell knows what. Then a video gets made that's clearly aimed at either taking me out or slowing me down, and the person responsible for the fake video turns out to be a Chinese intelligence operative who appears to be working hand in glove with the Russians. That about sums it up for you, doesn't it?
Please still buy the book.
As you can see,
there's plenty more that happens.
There's quite a lot going on.
Yeah, there is.
There's also quite a lot about, obviously, about the media. I mean, there are lots of ethical lines crossed all over the place, and John Bailey has some big ethical dilemmas along the way about what can be published, what can be said, what can be reported. I mean, you obviously know a lot about the media. There are lots of discussions with his editors about sources and all that sort of stuff. You know how that sausage is made. But what about the spooks? How did you get into that? What information did you get from people? Who are your sources?
Well, just turn that camera off. In our day jobs, we get to meet some interesting people. We get to have conversations with people who've met some interesting people. I went down to Canberra and caught up with some really interesting people. I mean, one guy, I obviously won't name names because he did work as a spook for a really long time, and he didn't tell me that, but I knew that. And just the insights that he gave me were just
about walk it out.
Yeah, well, that was a different guy, but look, so it's important to get those facts right, and I really do a mountain of research. In fact, in the back of the book, I thought this time around, it was Michelle, my publisher's idea actually, that I did so much research for this book. She said, people are going to want to know what's real, what's not. Have you thought about putting some of the books, like a recommended reading list or something, in the back? So I've done that, and included actually is a speech that Putin gave only a few years ago, which I can't remember the exact name of the speech, but he's literally writing about the reintegration of Ukraine into Russia. The fact that Ukraine has never been its own country, it's part of Russia. For Putin, the fall of the Soviet Union is the greatest, catastrophe of the 20th century. So yeah, getting that right in the research was important for me, and those interesting conversations of which I.
So research is one thing, right? It's research and writing up research in a journalistic way is one thing. Doing research and actually making it read like it's not research, it's quite a challenge, actually.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm a good listener, to be honest with you, in the editing process. I always think of books as a bit of a team effort, and for me, sometimes it was stripping out some of that stuff. Maybe I put a little bit too much in. I mean, what does the reader really need to know? The distance between East and West Germany, or you don't. I mean, that's not a good example, but anyway, you get my drift. Yeah. How much detail do they actually need on things? So I pumped up, particularly my second book, and I think the third one, with probably too much of that in there, and then we were stripping it out. So then when I wrote this book, I learned how to slow down a bit, and actually something that Chris Hammer, who's sitting here tonight, said once, that it's not wasted time to get up from your desk and just go for a walk. Plotting is not wasted time if you're not writing any words that day, but you're still thinking about the book, you're ordering your thoughts. So I started doing that a lot more with this book, and that was quite liberating, to be honest. I took the pressure off entirely, and it actually helped me write better, because I just really included the things I wanted. And the other thing that I try to do with books on the information front is the real show rather than tell. So dialogue for me is huge in my books. I really want readers to know and feel a character from what they say. So yeah, I think you can, with good writing, you can actually convey and dive deeply into an issue without listing bullet point facts.
So you changed a bit of the way that you were approaching writing. So,
yeah.
And this is book 4. Do you think you're getting better at it?
I hope so. I mean, that's going to be for readers to judge, really. Although I'll tell you a funny story. A guy who runs Bo Morris Books in Melbourne. I was down there for State of Fear, which I was fortunate enough to travel for because it was before COVID, and then COVID obviously ruined everything for everyone, and I was stuck, no travelling for the enemy within. But I was in Melbourne talking to him, and he's saying, look, and I remember my publisher saying, this guy loves your books, okay, he's hand selling them, he loves them. So I got there and I thought, okay, this is great. And he said, yeah, I'm really enjoying, the first one was great, this one you got even better. He said, I got no doubt, how's the next one going? I said, yeah, it's pretty good. And he goes, beware of the fourth. I said, what? And he said, I'm telling you, every writer does it. They stuff up the fourth. And I went, okay. And it's just
okay, you haven't.
Yeah, no. So here's the funny bit. So just out of the blue, I get this email about 2 months ago. Literally, it was like 5 words. It was, congratulations, you broke the hoodoo.
And you definitely did. Well done. Look, the other thing about this book is it's set in Sydney mostly and Canberra. So, Sydney Noir, which has taken a long time to come back from Peter Corris, but we're getting there. We're getting there. And even better, Canberra Noir, which I don't think's ever had a moment in the sun. It doesn't really, there's no path to sales with Canberra Noir. Like, what was this?
I wanted to challenge myself. I don't know. I thought if you're writing a book about spies, you can't not be in Canberra. So I had to take Bailey there. And look, I've always, in my earlier books, Ronnie Johnson comes and goes and he disappears and he ducks up and down from Canberra. And this was my Ronnie Johnson book. That's the way I describe it. Because I'm always writing 2, sometimes 3, or mainly 3 perspectives actually. And always weighted to Bailey. But this book was really heavily a large perspective of Ronnie. And the difference with this book, for those that have read the others, is in the first 3 books, Bailey's picking himself up off the ground, he's doing what he does and chasing the truth, and Ronnie bails him out a bit. In this book, Ronnie needs his help. And that's a really uncomfortable place for him to be, because he's a journalist who chases the truth. Ronnie is the spy who muddies the waters. But Ronnie needs him.
Well, there's the ethical lines again.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I think you deal with that really well.
Well, it opens with it really. There's no spoiler because it's the first. It's only a paragraph, but Bailey's sitting in a car with a guy tied up in the tray, and it's all because of Ronnie Johnson. And then we get into the book, and that was an interesting place for him to be.
And the other good thing about this book is there's a dog, Campo, the greyhound. I've decided all books should have dogs. All books should have dogs. But perhaps all investigative journalists should have a greyhound, because they never seem to need to go out and do a piss. Like it's this dog, seriously? Yeah. Greyhounds. I'm going there. Kill the dog or not, where do you stand?
That was my wife. Did you hear that? So there you go. Where do I go with that? No, look, you killed a cat, didn't you?
I killed a dog.
Was it a dog?
Yeah, I killed a dog. Yeah.
That was. I remember reading that at the time. I was going, Jesus, because we are warned as writers. Yeah. You can torture people in horrific ways, but do not hurt the pets. So look, for me, it's a definite. I'd be literally sleeping in the doghouse if I killed the dog. But on the dog story, and Justin's going to hate me telling this story, because so we had this beautiful dog called Dottie, right? That was the first greyhound we owned, and she was a special dog. We thought of her as a bit of a therapy dog in a way, because kids that were frightened of dogs, she actually taught them that dogs are okay. She used to walk up, stick her head there, and they'd give her a pat. And she was beautiful. And she unfortunately died. And then we're dog people, and we thought about getting a dog, and we were going to get another greyhound. We know they need homes, and we love Dottie. So we drove out to the little dog farm to go pick up our new dog, and with the kids, and we went there and we were looking at the dogs, and the most excitable, annoying of the dogs, they were really pushing this dog into a scene, because they're dog people. They're going to be able to take this one, because there was this really dopey one sitting in the corner saying, let's take that one. Anyway, so this one, and our dog that we ended up taking home looked like a bear. Had been sleeping outside, had this big thick bear coat. I was looking at it going, oh my God, what have we done? But we were talking around names with the dog, and no one really had any ideas. We're driving the car home. I said, guys, what about Ronnie? And the kids were like, well, that's a good name. I like Ronnie. It just seems like, oh, I think I like Ronnie too. And then a couple of days later, I'm like, come here, Ronnie Johnson, come here. And Justine looked at me and said, you bastard. So yeah, we named our dog after Ronnie Johnson. Right. Or I.
So look, let's just talk a bit about John Bailey, who's the main character in all of the books. I mean, as I said, he's a crusty old hack who's been through a few things. He's had a bit of a hard time. He's been an alcoholic almost. He's back again. He's not drinking. He's an enduring character, and incredibly, he's still passionate about journalism. Like, what's going on there?
Well, it's all he's got in a way. I mean, for a long time, I think he's where I started this book, and he was a little bit cliched in that first book, I think, but I've known so many journalists like him, and I'm not looking at you at all, Brisso, and I'm really not. So please don't think it's not based on Brisso, but in Australia and in the UK, I worked with some amazing correspondents and reporters, and there is something about those that the real diggers that are so obsessed with their craft, and many of them have had several wives, they are chronic, many of them alcoholics or functioning alcoholics, but they just drink too much, and they tend to put their job first before everything, and in doing so they sacrifice a lot of the other part of life that we have as parents and as friends and everything. And so Bailey, in the greater good, he's literally at rock bottom. He's almost falling off that cliff, and then we see him sort of get up and find his reasons to live. And his reasons to live are first and foremost his daughter that he'd sort of left alone, like many ways, not necessarily walked out on, but left back in Australia when he was chasing war zones for decades. And so rekindling his relationship with her is really important. And the other thing, well, two other things, there was Sharon Dexter, character, his woman that he had a relationship with and again had walked out of for work. And getting back in touch with her and sort of trying to rebuild that bridge, which he does. And then the last one is actually the one that keeps him going, which is his job. It's all he knows, is chasing the truth. And he's lost without it. So that's actually what he knows how to do. It gives him purpose. And I know a lot of journalists like that. It really gives them a purpose. They hang out with other journalists. They are constantly working. They're constantly, talking to sources. It's changing a bit. But I've known a lot like it. So for me with him, I was just picking bits from, I guess, real people that I knew, and some of those I'd seen the damage, and some of them have spoken to me about that, the damage that it had caused them. And so that's that real side of Bailey that I wanted to convey. I wanted to make him a real character.
Yeah, and you do. I mean, the damage stuff is, it's fairly widely shared among that generation particularly, of foreign correspondents who've seen a lot of stuff and not got a lot of help along the way. The other thing, and I'm going to tell this story against myself, but you may have had a similar experience. These books can get a little technical when it comes to things like guns, for instance. And I remember after the first edition of my first book came out, and there was a scene in there where this person gets a Glock out and flicks the safety switch. I got so many emails from people who said, "What the hell are you talking about? Glocks don't have safety switches." So, has it ever happened to you?
I think it has. I mean, look, with the gun information, like less is more for me with that sort of technical stuff. I mean, guy walks into a bar with a gun, shoots someone. That's the sort of Chandler school of telling that sort of.
Yeah, don't worry, that make and model just result.
Yeah. I mean, I do a little bit on the make and model, but no, not too much. I did have a guy I went to school with just reach out of the blue and say, and actually did say that I just had oversimplified something on a technicality on a gun. I thought, mate, really? After 10 years, this is what you're aiming to message me about.
But this is the thing, there's a lot of readers out there who know too much.
Yeah.
They really do. But the other thing is about Bailey is that he gets a gun and he seems to know how to shoot it. Like, come on.
Well, you mean, well, does he? I mean, he fires off every single round the first time he does it, and doesn't hit a thing, almost kills himself.
There's a bit in the book about poisons, obviously, like the Novichok stuff, and nations weaponising poisons, and all of that as part of spycraft. Where did that come from?
I mean, it came from a lot of research into what Russia had been doing. So all those poisoning attempts and cases that we've seen, there's been like dozens, right? I mean, there's also been, persons who've fallen out with Putin that just suddenly fall off a balcony and, it's a sad suicide attempt. So yeah, like I
Windows, I think.
Sorry?
Windows, weren't they?
Yeah, Windows.
Yeah.
But just enjoying the view, Bristow and Fell.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
But with those, I talked to a doctor about that and talking about like where the place would be where you're testing those things, and where the specialty area, which is obviously Westmead, which is why I put it there. And then on the detail, I was just doing all my own research on on the web, but when you start doing all my own research, that really conjures some COVID, things. But no, there was enough out there.
So have you had any response from spooks who've read it, or anyone who knows anything about these things really, who've read the book?
No.
Right. I'll be very interested to know.
Yeah. I don't know if there are any. No, John Mangos sent me a tweet last night.
Oh, well, there you go.
Said he'd read it already.
Look, the other question that we always get asked is the process. And, you're someone who's an incredibly busy person. When do you find the time? How do you do it? What advice do you have for other people who might want to do it? Like writing a book is it's a big deal, right? It's a big thing.
Yeah, look, I've settled through some tough lessons for me, and I think family too. My first book, I was fitting it in around everything I could, but probably stealing a bit of time, where I probably shouldn't have. Which learned, it was a bit of a tough lesson. I've got a very patient wife that put up with me on that. But I think once I signed the 3-book deal, I thought, okay, I've got to figure out how I'm going to write the rest. And because I love it so much, I just had to find how could I, eke out some time that would be, so that it wouldn't take away from my work and wouldn't take away from family. So I write Saturday and Sunday mornings. I get up at about anywhere between 4:30 and 5:30, and I'll write for 3 to 5 hours Saturday and Sunday mornings. I was a little bit hungover last Saturday morning, so I didn't get up till just after 6. I know. But that's how I fit it in. And then once netball gets going or something with my daughter or with my son's rugby, where I've got things on. But I love those 2 touch points every week. During the week, I don't touch it at all while I'm working. But if I have little ideas that pop in my head, I might just punch it in the notes section in my phone. Could be on the bus, could be in a meeting that's really dragging on. No. My boss is here, so that was a joke. No. So look, it's it's a weekend thing for me.
Look, the other thing about these books, and sort of the thing a lot of people who write them look for, is where it goes from after publication and potential screen adaptations, and I understand there has been some interest. Can you talk about where you're at?
I can talk a little bit about it. I've got some approved lines. No, but no. Look, CJZ, an awesome production company. Made My Life as Murder, Gruen, Bondi Rescue, a lot of great things, and they've bought the rights to it, which is really exciting. And there's a writers' room happening. So there's the rights to all the books and the character, Bailey and the others. So there's a writers' room happening on that soon, and not
in LA, obviously.
No. Look, a great screenwriter has been signed on to lead that, and he's a wonderful writer and a really nice guy too. So which helps. So I'm really looking forward to getting going with that. That's not too distant future. So yeah, it's exciting.
And this is the 4th. Is there another Bailey book, or are you going to try and push somewhere else, or what's happening now?
I'm sticking with Bailey. I feel like I've got so many more of his books in me. So I'm halfway through the next one, and I've got a really pretty clear idea now on the one after, and a bit of a backstory one too. So I've always got lots of ideas. It's just sort of shaping them and with my publisher and before I get going but no, I'm sticking with Bailey for a while.
Great, good to hear. Time to open up for some questions. I'm sure there's some out there. Anyone? Just put a hand up.
Were you able to fit in the bloke standing in Canberra in the Russian guy in the funny little hut?
The question was, were you able to fit in the funny guy, the Russian guy in the funny little hut?
Had I been writing the book now, I would have got Ronnie Johnson to dress up as an Uber Eats guy and turn up and knock him off that way, because that he was ordering off the chart apparently. Yeah, he was just getting deliveries every day while he was staging his little project.
Borscht delivered to the front.
Yeah. And Dan Murphy's big bottles of vodka.
Anyone else?
I'll throw it.
Oh, here we go.
All
Chris.
right, just quick. I mean, I'm asking this on behalf of a friend of mine who might have tried to write a book and didn't quite get there. So not me. But I always say when you start to write a book, you write around the characters to get that going, and plot is secondary. So the question to you is was that the way you began the series? And what happens when you get to number 4, when the audience and you know the characters so thoroughly? Is that sort of then become secondary and it all becomes about the plot?
So the question is plot versus character, and after 4 books, how does character and plot work? Because people know the character incredibly well by then.
Yeah, be interested to hear your thoughts on this one too. For me, I came up with the character first. In fact, the first page of The Greater Good, I wrote in a cafe around the corner from the ABC. And I just went there in a lunch break one day. I'd always ate at my desk and I got, a bit jack of it. Thought, you know what, I just need some time to myself, away from these people. So I went around the corner with my iPad, and this idea had been bubbling around this character in my head for a while, and I knew that it would be about the US and China and Australia caught in the middle. So I had an overarching idea of a plot, and that was it. But I knew the character. So the first page I wrote in that cafe, it's almost unchanged in the book that got published. It was him walking onto a murder scene, and the woman who was in charge of that murder scene, the police woman, was the woman that he walked out of a decade ago. So that gave me 2 characters. So I think to answer the question then, character is so, you've got to have amazing characters. You've got to have people that you love and hate and want to read. Backstory is really effective in the books that follow. You can slice off extra layers of them and give the readers bits that they didn't know before. In book 4 and book 5 and book 6, you can go back. But then you actually need to remind readers as well about those characters if they're getting to know them for the first time. So you might have spent 3 pages on it in the first book. In book 6, you might just do a paragraph, and it reminds readers of who it is, and it gives the reader who doesn't know them some information about them. But then come to the second part, which is plot. And for me in thrillers, plot is everything. If you don't have a ripping plot to carry the book all the way through and to keep dangling things out there for readers to want to chase, you're in big trouble. Doesn't matter how interesting your characters are. I think different types of writing character can play a much, much bigger role, and it's not to say you can't have really interesting characters and exploration in thrillers, but plot is definitely really, really important.
Does that help you, Chris?
Pass that on.
Yeah, just pass that on. Anna?
Yeah, I think it kind of is the same sort of question. I was going to ask about the challenges and rewards of writing a character in a series, but then wanting also to bring new readers on at every book as well. So trying to entice readers to maybe start at Killer Traitor Spy, but not having had any intro to your protagonist. If you feel like you've already answered that, I do have a backup question.
Oh, well...
So hang on for the for our online audience. The question was, what was the question?
that counts. You said you wouldn't heckle. That counts as a heckle.
I want you to talk about the challenges and rewards of writing a particular character that goes through a series while also enticing new readers at every book. So, you don't want to be like, hey, this is Killer Traitor Spy, go back to the first one. Do you know what I mean? How
I'm sure
do you make it fresh
our
every time?
internet audience has heard that.
Yeah.
But, how do you write a series and keep people interested who may not have read the first or the second or the third?
Look, it's about you do need to find ways and new ways to reintroduce characters. And I guess an example of that for John Bailey. So in The Enemy Within, which is his 3rd book, so he's gone through some pretty big trauma in the 2nd book. So the 3rd book, his daughter buys him Ronnie, the dog. So that dog actually is a bit of it's a friend. A Campo. Ronnie. I'm really in trouble now. I'm really in trouble now.
Things are getting pretty weird.
Dog's name's Campo. Yeah. Dog's name's Campo. And look, the Campo. That's right. Well, funny you should say it. So Campo actually.
Oh,
the
Campo.
dog.
Campese. I've got it.
Yeah. Bloody AFL. AFL is ruining this country. But so
rugby is a big thing in this book too.
So Campo. Okay, I'm coming back to your question. I've got to deal with this Campo thing. So Campo is actually a female dog, and there's a conversation where someone says to him, "How could you call your dog Campo?" He said, "Well, she was elegant on the field. Campo was elegant on the field." So that's how I was able to, make Campo a woman.
There's no way you'd kill that dog.
No, it's this dog. The dog's there right way through. The dog will be there burying Bailey,
That's
and
right.
the audience will be fine with it.
Exactly.
But anyway, going back to your question, it's, I think, reminding characters in those ways. So Campo is like a trauma dog in a way for Bailey, a friend, someone that keeps him company, looks out for him. And that's in the way that his daughter thought about it when she bought it for him. So that enables me to talk about the trauma that he's encountered in his life, and without actually telling it again. But then I use flashbacks as well from his time in the Middle East. You need to find clever ways of reintroducing the characters, because every single one of my books can be read as a standalone. You don't need to read them in any order. And you need to do that as a writer. Series are great, but there's no point sort of saying, if you're confused, don't worry, go back to book one and you'll learn and enjoy this book. But pause now, you can't do that.
Chris?
So 4 books in, what do you know now as a writer that you didn't know when you took that lunch break outside the ABC?
Yes, good question. That's a journalist's question. 4 books in, what do you know now that you didn't know then?
The delete key is your friend. Look, something that I mentioned to you earlier around, there's no wasted time at your desk or in your allotted writing time. Sometimes that's just plotting and thinking time. So the key lesson with those 2 things together is that if I'm not sure where I'm going, I stop and I work things out. And it may take me a week, it may take me 2 weeks, it may take me a day, and then I'll get going again. So that's not wasted time for me, and it makes the editing process far less painful as well. But also, look forward to the editing process too, because it is your job to write a better book every single time you sit down. Yeah. And that's why when you're working with your editor and your publisher, it's a team effort. You want honest opinion from them. You don't want them sitting there saying, "Oh, bravo, well done." It's not going to happen. They'll be like, "It's good, but it's not great." And then, well, why is it not great? And then you'll work on it and you'll make it great, hopefully.
I always say to my editors, don't be afraid. I've had an editing session with Sally Neighbour at Four Corners. There's nothing you can do that will kill me. There's a question over there.
I actually have 2 questions, but three to answer that. The first question was, when you're thinking about the plots, do you actually, post-it notes up on the wall, or do you sit at the desk and start typing? How do you plot out the plot? And the second one is, when you're developing your characters, is it more fun developing the detective or journalist or CIA agent, or is it the baddie?
So 2 questions: how do you plot, and is it which character is more fun, the good guy or the bad guy?
On the plotting thing, look, I once bought a corkboard and I put it behind the computer. And then I didn't use it for a little while, actually ever. But within a couple of weeks, my daughter just started decorating with all her photos and things. But I never used it. So I would like to think that I'm going to get all organised and have all this plot things going. And I've seen people do it, but I can't do it. I have a Word document, and I'll have maybe multiple Word documents going, and I'll have little chapter summaries. I'll have bullet points, and bullet points are really, really helpful. It's like, what happens next? What are the key things I need to happen in the book with bullet points? And they're just there to remind me, and then I get going with the writing. What do you do?
Well, I think this is, I'm very similar, but I think this is an interesting thing, because people often say, are you a plotter or a pantser? Like, do you sit down on your ass and just let it go, or do you plot it all out bit by bit? And I just think it's an invalid argument, because the people who take a long time to plot are the people who write a novel without plotting it. It's just a longer form of plotting, right? It just takes you a lot longer to do it. And maybe it's not as efficient, I don't know, but I don't actually think it's any different. It's just an extended version of a person who writes a plot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in like 2,000 words or something, I do mine in 90,000.
Yeah. No, I've not heard it explained like that before. You've grown very wise in your time. But no, that's actually really clear. There was a second part of the question around writing baddies. You kick off
baddies or the goodies?
It's
your show, come on.
Well, I just want to share the stage, Bruce. But I like writing them both. But I don't tend to write perspective of a bad person. Maybe I don't want to go there. But I think they're better when they're more mysterious. And with my first book, The Greater Good, I actually did have some chapters as a perspective from a Chinese spy. And then the book wasn't quite working with it there. So I deleted them all, and then I actually rewrote his role as this mysterious figure. So we learned even more about this guy by seeing him interact, by watching him and by fearing him, and then eventually in Bailey's case, encountering him and being hurt by him.
Very wise. There's no line of that. Thank you.
It's slightly tongue-in-cheek. About half this audience or more is female. Would we read spy thrillers if there was a damaged female journalist turned detective?
The question is, would an audience like female protagonists, basically, who are these sort of wizened, old, damaged individuals?
Look, I think so. I mean, with all of my books, I always have a strong female protagonist in there as well. And in fact, the layers of my female characters, contain a lot of damage too. And Annie Brooks, who's been a recurring character in the last 3 books, not in the first one, she is in a way that character. And what I've done with the way that I introduce characters and then build on them, they may not have a huge role in one book, but I may actually turn to book 6 or 7 and suddenly they'll have a huge role. So I will unpack more of those characters. So the simple answer to the question is absolutely. And I think that we have so many wonderful female writers in Australia right now, writing great crime fiction. There's 2 sitting up front here with me now. I think that we're getting a lot better as writers across the board, not just because we have great women writers, but because I think men are realising that a lot of those old Chandler books and whatever, they're great reads, but a lot of the women were bit parts in those. And
also most of the readers, to be honest, are women.
Yeah, exactly.
That you ask publishers who they're pitching their books to most of the time and who's buying books, and most of the people who are buying books are women. And so these days, you know, you've got to be pretty careful as a white man of a certain age about how you approach it.
Yeah, not alienating readers. Yeah.
One more. I think we've got time for one more.
If it were up to you, who would you cast?
That's a good question. Come on. Who's the actor?
Pass. Brisso, who would you put past the Bailey?
Couldn't possibly go there.
No, go there.
That's a tough one, isn't it? It is a tough question to answer.
It is because, I mean, I think when it does come to the screen, this book is going to have its own life as well, and that's the beauty of books to screen, is that, yeah, it's based on my characters in my books, but you know, if you're moving the setting a little bit, the time and stuff, it could change the age a little bit, for instance. But
Yeah.
I think that's okay. One person, the Ronnie Johnson character, I've always thought, you know, that someone like what's his name now? No, Ronnie Johnson. Well, Ronnie Johnson, I've always thought is actually black. So Denzel Washington or someone. You know. So if that's possible, Claire, and Nick, I think, you know, we can make that happen, can't we?
All right, I think that's probably about it. Thank you very much. It's been great, and